When the F4U Corsair first roared across Pacific skies, American pilots nicknamed it the Whistling Death. With bent wings, blistering speed, and a roar like no other, it looked like a monster built for war and flew like one too. But while Allied forces saw it as a game changer, Japan viewed it through a very different lens. What did the Imperial Japanese Navy truly think of this brutal blue-winged predator? From terrified field reports to grudging respect buried in declassified memos, this is the shocking truth behind Japan's secret opinions of the Corsair and why their fear came long before their surrender. Enter the Corsair. America's flying monster lands in the Pacific. In early 1943, the F4U Corsair arrived in the Pacific theater, not with fanfare, but with skepticism. Its brutal design, gull wings bent like a predator in mid-dive, made even American crews uneasy. But when it screamed into battle, everything changed. Japanese pilots were used to dominating the skies with the nimble Mitsubishi Zero, a plane that relied on agility, finesse, and surprise. The Corsair shattered that illusion with a top speed of over 400 mph and dive speeds that left enemy aircraft spinning in panic. It didn't just join the fight, it transformed it. Reports from Japanese air bases in Rabaul and Bougainville described a new blue demon that moved faster than expected and struck with terrifying accuracy. Some initial Japanese pilots mistook it for the F6F Hellcat, until field analysts noted its unique wing shape and longer fuselage. By the time Tokyo realized what it truly was, damage had already been done. Veteran pilots who had once hunted wildcats with ease found themselves outgunned and outrun. The Corsair didn't dance in dogfights, it smashed into them. And as wave after wave of kamikaze missions failed to slow its dominance, Japan began to understand this was no ordinary fighter. This was an airborne juggernaut designed to end an empire's dream. The birdcage cockpit and bent wings. First impressions from Tokyo. To Japanese analysts in 1943, the Corsair was a contradiction. It looked awkward, almost primitive with its massive propeller, oversized nose, and peculiar inverted gull wings. The birdcage cockpit, cramped and heavily framed, seemed to offer poor visibility. Early intelligence reports even mocked it, calling it unsuited for agile combat. Engineers in Tokyo believed it was a rushed design, built more for intimidation than performance. But first impressions betrayed the truth. What the Japanese missed in those early observations was the Corsair's underlying strength. Raw, unrelenting power. The bent wings weren't just cosmetic. They allowed the use of the largest propeller ever fitted to a Navy fighter. Powered by the 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, this gave the Corsair unmatched acceleration and dive performance. In a dogfight, Japanese pilots discovered the Corsair could outdive anything they had, and when it pulled up, it brought 650 caliber machine guns to bear. The very features that had once invited ridicule soon inspired fear. Field notes retrieved from downed Zero squadrons in 1944 revealed a change in tone. The new American fighter has overwhelming forward firepower. It strikes fast and disappears before retaliation. The birdcage was no cage at all. It was a hunter's perch, and the bent wings, they weren't deformities. They were the signature of death descending from the sky. Hell on the deck. Carrier trouble the Japanese never expected. Ironically, the Japanese Navy never expected the Corsair to become a dominant carrier fighter because, at first, neither did the US Navy. The Corsair's long nose and stiff landing gear made carrier landings treacherous. Early versions bounced down decks or nosed into the sea, earning curses from American deck crews and quiet smirks from Japanese observers. Naval intelligence believed the Corsair to be land-based only, limited in deployment, and therefore strategically weaker than the Hellcat. But that assumption was fatal. While the Navy struggled with carrier trials, the U.S. Marine Corps had already embraced the Corsair from island airstrips like Bougainville and Peleliu. Operating in brutal, muddy, makeshift conditions, Corsair squadrons delivered lethal ground support and established air superiority. Japanese commanders, expecting limited reach, suddenly found their airfields bombed and strafed by Corsairs that weren't supposed to be there. By late 1944, the Navy had solved the Corsairs' deck issues. Carrier-based squadrons now launched this beast straight into Japanese-held skies, catching Zero pilots off guard. One captured Japanese report expressed disbelief. "We believed the blue fighter could not land on ships. Now they come from the sea. There is no escape." The very flaw that once grounded the Corsair had been turned into a tactical trick. And for Japan, it was now hell, both on land and on the water. Fast, furious, and fearsome. Technical specs that shocked Japanese analysts. In the world of aerial combat, numbers don't lie, and the Corsair's numbers were terrifying. To Japanese analysts used to calculating slight advantages in speed or climb rate, the F4U's specs read like an impossible equation. With a top speed of 446 ms and a dive rate that could reach over 500 ms, the Corsair was the fastest US carrier-based fighter of the war. Its massive 13-foot propeller, driven by a supercharged engine, gave it unmatched torque. Combined with a rugged airframe, the aircraft could dive, shoot, and climb away before the enemy could react. Japanese engineers, steeped in the doctrine of lightness and agility, were stunned. Their beloved Zero, so dominant in 1942, was now slower, less protected, and far less deadly. The Corsair featured bulletproof glass, armor plating, and self-sealing fuel tanks, none of which existed in early Japanese designs. Even kamikaze squads feared it. A single pass from a Corsair could rip apart a E-O bomber or a dive unit before it reached its target. More shockingly, the Corsair handled beautifully at high speeds where Zeros lost maneuverability. In post-war interviews, Japanese engineers admitted, "We underestimated the American design. It was not elegant, but it was effective and deadly." The Corsair wasn't just a machine, it was a message. Speed, power, and protection had just rewritten the rules of air superiority. Combat encounters, how the Corsair overpowered the Zero and the Oscar. When the Corsair first entered combat against Japanese fighters, the results were immediate and brutal. In the Solomon Islands, Corsair squadrons tore through formations of Zeros and Oscars, Japan's best light fighters, with ruthless efficiency. Dogfights that once favored the nimble Zero were flipped on their heads. The Corsair struck from altitude, unloaded its firepower, and vanished before the Japanese pilots could react. The legendary agility of the Zero was meaningless if it couldn't get close. Veteran Japanese aces began reporting unsettling trends. American fighters no longer tried to outturn them. Instead, they used slashing attacks and vertical dives, tactics impossible for the lighter Japanese aircraft to counter. Lieutenant Hiroshi Nishizawa, one of Japan's most skilled Zero pilots, reportedly called the Corsair the fighter with no honor. "It does not fight, it kills." That statement, though bitter, reflected the shifting balance of power. In the Battle of Okinawa, Corsair squadrons shot down kamikaze waves before they reached Allied ships, saving thousands of lives. The once invincible image of the Zero cracked under the relentless pressure of firepower and modern tactics. Post-battle analysis by Japanese commanders confirmed the worst. The Corsair had not only outclassed their fighters, it had shattered their doctrine. The age of maneuverable duels was over. The era of shock, speed, and steel had begun. The kamikaze effect, Japan's psychological shift after facing the Corsair. By 1944, something far more dangerous than bullets began affecting Japanese pilots facing the Corsair: fear. Though their training emphasized bravery and sacrifice, even elite aviators couldn't ignore what they were up against. Reports from frontline air groups described a black gull-winged demon that could strike from the sun and vanish in clouds, leaving only wreckage behind. The Corsair's distinct sound, an eerie whistle caused by airflow over its engine intakes, began inducing psychological stress. Veteran pilots who had survived years of air combat admitted they felt unease at the sound alone. They called it whistling death, a name originally coined by US Marines but adopted by the very men it hunted. Kamikaze units meant to terrify Allied sailors were themselves terrified when Corsairs patrolled the skies. In Okinawa, Japanese officers noted with concern that kamikaze attack success rates plummeted when Corsairs flew combat air patrol. Pilots hesitated to launch or veered off course to avoid contact. The aircraft's presence was enough to destabilize entire mission formations. Japanese command understood they weren't just losing a physical battle, they were losing the mental war too. The Corsair didn't just destroy planes, it eroded morale, sowed fear, and replaced the Zero's legacy with a new name that haunted enemy sleep, cracked codes, and crushed morale. What captured Japanese documents revealed. Declassified after-action reports recovered post-war from Japanese naval archives confirmed that intelligence agencies had drastically misjudged the Corsair. Early assessments had classified it as a limited-use ground support aircraft. Its size, unusual shape, and delayed carrier integration led Tokyo's analysts to believe it was a transitional design with poor agility and short service life. That illusion shattered within months. Updated reports labeled the Corsair as highly dangerous, especially when flown in coordinated squadrons. Analysts noted the Corsair's dominance in both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions, its ability to protect ships, and its impressive loiter time over targets. But the most alarming insight came from intercepted pilot debriefs sent Japanese aviators had begun second-guessing their own maneuvers. They would abandon attacks if they suspected Corsairs nearby, fearing the aircraft's explosive firepower. For Japan's military planners, this marked a psychological threshold. An enemy plane had become a fear object, something that undermined discipline and instinct. The Corsair's unpredictability, brute force, and strategic deployment had undone years of doctrinal training. In one 1945 intelligence bulletin, an unnamed officer concluded, "This is not an aircraft to match. It is an aircraft to avoid." That level of respect born from miscalculation came too late to change Japan's fate. Aerial samurai versus the whistling death. Clashing combat philosophies. For decades, Japanese aerial doctrine had revolved around the Bushido spirit, honor, bravery, and close-quarter combat. The Zero embodied this. Nimble, elegant, stripped of armor to prioritize dogfighting. But the Corsair didn't play by those rules. It refused to duel. It struck from angles the Zero couldn't match, and it survived hits the Zero couldn't absorb. To Japanese pilots, it seemed unfair, dishonorable even. They called its tactics cowardly, describing American pilots as unspirited. But over time, that criticism gave way to grudging respect. The Corsair's tactics weren't cowardly, they were effective. American pilots weren't interested in honorable deaths. They wanted strategic victories, and they got them. The Corsair introduced a new combat philosophy. Dominance through disruption. It blurred the lines between fighter and attacker. One pilot could defend a ship, strafe a column, and win a dogfight all in a single sortie. Japanese strategists trapped in tradition struggled to adapt. In combat briefings, trainers warned rookies not just about the Corsair's speed, but its unpredictability. It does not chase, one document read. It waits. In the skies above Iwo Jima and the Philippine Sea, Corsairs weren't just enemies, they were predators. This philosophical mismatch became Japan's undoing. They had trained warriors for duels, but faced hunters in a battlefield ruled by innovation. The Corsair's dark reputation beyond the skies. The Corsair's battlefield impact wasn't limited to air superiority. It also earned a fearsome reputation as a ground support aircraft. Japanese troops on the islands described it as a demon with claws. referring to the brutal strafing runs it executed with deadly precision. When flying low over jungle terrain, the Corsair's 50-caliber machine guns and rocket pods could tear through bunkers, columns, and supply lines with devastating efficiency. What made it even more terrifying was its sudden appearance. Japanese garrisons often had no warning before the Corsair struck. Its high speed and steep dive angle made it nearly impossible to track or shoot down in time. Survivors described the sound of its engines as death approaching with a scream. The aircraft's psychological effect on ground troops was so severe that some Japanese commanders began ordering their men to retreat deeper into tunnels and caves whenever a Corsair was heard overhead. No longer was it just a threat to pilots, it was a nightmare for infantry as well. Marines on the ground loved it, calling it their guardian angel. But to the Japanese, it was an unstoppable phantom that ruled not only the skies, but the land beneath them. Legacy of fear. What Japan remembered most about the Corsair. By 1945, even Japan's top aces had come to respect and, in some cases, fear the Corsair. This wasn't just because it outperformed their aircraft, it had outlasted their best ideas. The myth of the Zero supremacy was gone. So was the belief that sheer willpower could overcome firepower. The Corsair helped dismantle Japan's elite pilot corps, which by the war's end was reduced to undertrained, overwhelmed rookies. With every sortie, the Corsair inflicted more than just losses. It inflicted doubt. It symbolized America's wartime evolution from improvised defense to overwhelming offense. It proved that adaptation and engineering could undo even the most established doctrines. Historians often call the F-6F Hellcat the main Zero killer. But in truth, the Corsair was the executioner of Japanese air confidence. Japan had thought the Corsair was too flawed to matter. In the end, it mattered more than they could admit. When surviving pilots described it, they spoke less of speed or guns and more of dread. Not because it was beautiful, but because it didn't need to be. The Corsair's legacy in Japan wasn't one of stats. It was one of fear, confusion, and shattered expectations. The Corsair didn't just win battles, it rewrote the very rules of war in the Pacific. If you love these deep dives into aviation legends and battlefield psychology, make sure to subscribe for more. What aircraft matchup should we uncover next? Let us know in the comments below.